Welcome back to another episode of Rooted. I'm your host, Jade Williams, and I'm so glad you're here with me. If this is your first time joining, welcome to the space where we're doing the work to be grounded, to be anchored, and to grow deeper in God's purpose. And for all of my returning listeners, hey y'all, thank you for coming back and rocking with me. It is something that I do not take lightly. I know that you could be anywhere, and the fact that you are here, I am just so humbled, so honored, and so grateful. We have entered into a new month, and I'm truly excited. I am, again, very grateful to have each one of you here and just really excited about where we're headed. But today, I need you all to lean in because I'm going to talk about something today, and it's just another conversation that we've been having. It's a call to shift your mindset, realign your vision, and to start seeing what's happening around you through a kingdom lens. Right now, if you look at the news, social media, and even in your sphere of influence, in your circles, the conversations that you're having, it's easy to feel like the world is spiraling out of control. Everywhere you turn, there's talk of economic downturns, rising inflation, industries are crumbling, companies are laying off employees by the thousands. And I mean, maybe even in your own life, you're feeling the weight of uncertainty. Things that you counted on no longer feel stable. And in seasons like this, the natural reaction is fear. Anxiety creeps in, doubt tries to take root. Some people start hoarding resources out of panic, and others become paralyzed, unsure of what to do next. And I believe that that is where we are. So I know that this conversation is going to be one that's going to be transformational. But here's what I need you to understand in all of this. Just because things look unorthodox does not mean that they are unauthorized. So we've been conditioned to believe that when things look unstable, they are outside of God's will. But what if I told you that some of the things you are calling a setback are actually setups for something greater? What if I told you that what looks like disorder in the natural is actually divine reordering in the spirit? There are things happening right now that don't make sense to the world. But if you are a believer, you don't live according to the world's systems. You operate under the kingdom's economy. And that means that you have to shift your perspective to see things from heaven's point of view. One of the greatest examples of this is in Proverbs 13 and 22, where it says, "A good person leaves an inheritance for their children's children, but the wealth of the wicked is laid up for the just." Now, I don't want you to miss this because that scripture is not just about a financial whirlwind. It is about a transference of resources, influence, and opportunity. Here's the reality. Before wealth can be transferred, systems have to shift. Businesses that once thrived have to fall. Positions that were once held by people outside of God's will have to be vacated so that new leaders can rise. Power structures that have been in place for decades have to be disrupted so that new authority can be established. And so when you see companies shutting down, when you see the market fluctuating, and you see that these industries are shifting, instead of panicking, I want you to ask yourself, is this the wealth transfer in motion? Is God shifting things to position his people for something greater? Because here's what I know for sure. Every major transfer in the Bible happened during a time of disruption. There was always a shaking before the shift. There was always a breaking before the breakthrough. And what looked unorthodox was always strategically authorized by God. What are you looking at in your own life right now that seems unorthodox? What transition, challenge, or even loss is it that you're facing that just doesn't make sense? Whatever it is, what if I told you that instead of resisting it, you need to embrace it as part of God's plan? Today, I'm going to challenge you to shift the way you see this season. I want to challenge you to stop looking at things through the lens of the world, of fear, and start looking at them through kingdom's lens of opportunity. because what we are experiencing right now is not the end. It is a divine repositioning. And if you are prepared, if you are positioned, and if you are open to seeing this moment through a kingdom perspective, you are going to experience the kind of breakthrough that only happens when heaven invades earth. So today we are going to get into it. Again, the scripture is Proverbs 13 and 22. A good person leaves an inheritance for their children's children, but the wealth of the wicked is laid up for the just. Now, when we hear this verse, we often always assume that one day God is going to cause it to it's going to be a money rain, and the money is just going to appear in our bank accounts, or that some unknown person, some atheist or something, is going to just write us a check out of nowhere. But that is not how God operates. When we talk about the wealth of the wicked being laid up for the just, we must understand that God is a strategic God. The transfer doesn't happen instantly. It happens through divine positioning, obedience, and preparation. God doesn't just hand wealth to the righteous. He shifts economies, he redirects opportunities, and he restructures industries to create avenues for his people to step into their rightful places. The transfer happens through movement, through obedience, through faith, and through preparation. And in order for a wealth transfer to happen, I told y'all, things must first shift. Old systems have to collapse. Corrupt industries must fall. Power structures that have been built on exploitation must be dismantled. This is where so many believers get stuck, because we see businesses shutting down, we see industries declining, we see the market shifting, and we automatically assume that it's a sign of failure. But what if the very thing that we fear are the birth pains for a greater blessing? What if, in order for the wealth transfer to happen, there has to be an economic downturn? What if the recession you fear is actually a repositioning? What if business is closing so that the kingdom entrepreneurs can rise? What if industries are crumbling because God is making room for leaders who will operate with integrity, wisdom, and vision? And not just any vision, but his vision. The world operates in cycles, but the kingdom operates in divine order. And in that order, every major shift is preceded by what looks like destruction. But I need you to understand that just because something looks unorthodox does not mean it is unauthorized. God is moving, but are you paying attention? Now, if you struggle to believe that God moves through disruptions, then let's take a moment to look at how he has worked through chaos in the Bible. Think about Joseph. In Genesis 37, God gave Joseph a dream that he would one day be in a position of leadership. But before that dream came to pass, his life took a turn that many would call tragic. His own brothers betrayed him and threw him into a pit. He was sold into slavery. He was falsely accused and imprisoned for years. None of it made sense until the famine came. And suddenly, the very things that seemed like his downfall became the stepping stones that placed him in the authority of Egypt. If Joseph had never been thrown into the pit, if he had never been sold, if he had never been imprisoned, he would not have been in position to be the answer to the crisis of his generation. God's methods may not be comfortable, but what you need to know is that they are always calculated. So let's just say Joseph's story just wasn't enough for you. Let's look at Daniel and the fall of Babylon. Babylon was the strongest empire of its time, built on wealth, power, and what? Corruption. It seemed indestructible. But in one night, the entire empire overthrown. The king was killed and a new regime took over. The fall of Babylon was necessary for the shift to happen. So when you look at the world today and you feel overwhelmed, I want to challenge you to shift your perspective. It may not look right to you, but it may be righteous in God's plan. We are witnessing a real-time transference of power, wealth, and influence. But it won't look like what we expected. And the ones who will step into what God is doing are the ones who are paying attention, who are preparing, and who are positioning themselves. So let me just take a moment and be transparent with you about my own unorthodox journey. A few years ago, I was caught in a cycle of chasing money. I had invested over $50,000 into coaching, mentorship. I was traveling across the country, speaking, teaching, training, doing all of the things imaginable. On the outside, it looked like I was thriving, but on the inside, I was lost. Why? Because I wasn't walking in alignment. I was chasing security. And then what I didn't imagine to happen, it happened. I hit a financial roadblock. The money stopped coming, the opportunities dried up, and everything that I had built felt like it was slipping through the crack of my fingers. I thought it was a setback. I was frustrated, I was overwhelmed. But when I began to look at it through another lens, I realized that it was actually a divine setup. How? Because God was stripping away everything that was built on my effort so that He could reposition me for something greater. At the time, it did feel unorthodox. It felt like I had failed. But hindsight has shown me that it was authorized by God, because that season forced me to realign my finances with my true purpose. And now I'm able to walk in what I was called to do. Sometimes what feels like a loss is just a shift in divine positioning. So you've heard all of this and you're still wondering, what do I do now? I want you to hear me and hear me well. I understand what's going on. I see all of the things. I want you to know that this is not the time to be afraid. This is not the time to sit back in confusion or wait for things to go back to normal. This is the time to get into position. The shift is happening whether you're ready for it or not. The transfer is already in motion. The question is, though, will you be ready to receive it? This is where stewardship becomes critical. And I need you to know that stewardship is not just about money. It's about how you manage everything that God has given you. Your time, your energy, your relationships, your opportunity, and yes, of course, your finances. If you're praying for God to increase you, then ask yourself, am I prepared for that increase? If the wealth transfer happened today, would you know how to handle it? Are you being intentional with your resources? Are you seeking wisdom, studying financial principles, and making decisions that align with God's order? Because wealth without wisdom leads to waste. Wealth without wisdom leads to waste. And opportunity without preparation leads to failure. God is not a wasteful God. He does not transfer wealth, influence, or power into the hands of those who will squander it. He gives it to those who are ready, those who are aligned, and those who understand that this shift is not just about money, it is about kingdom advancement. So today I want you to get serious about where you are. I want you to get in position. I want you to seek the kingdom for wisdom, and I want you to align your life with kingdom principles. Because what's coming next is only for those who are ready to receive it. The shift is here. The transfer is happening. But the question is, will you be ready? Just because something is unorthodox does not mean that it has not been authorized. It does not mean that God has not given the green light. It does not mean that we are to sit and twiddle our thumbs and figure out what we are to do next. It does not mean that we sit and we talk on the phone as if nothing is actually happening. It does not mean that we get to just sit around and not prepare. It does not mean that we can have faith and not do the work. It does not mean that God is going to open the windows of heaven and just pour out a blessing. It does not mean that all things do not work together for your good. It means that yes, all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and who trust him. It means that you must be prepared. It means that you need a preservation plan. It means that you can no longer do what you have been doing. It means that you must be in position. It means that you must be in alignment. If you've been here since week 1, we've been talking about leaving the past in the past. We've been talking about moving forward. We've been talking about aligning ourselves with God's purpose. We've been talking about being rooted in what it is that God is doing. It does not mean that we live in fear. It does not mean that what we feel is not valid. It means that we made a decision that we are going to trust God no matter what it looks like, no matter what it feels like, no matter what it sounds like. God, I'm going to trust you. I don't know what you're doing in this season. I don't know where you're taking me. I don't know what you're saying, but I'm going to trust you. I'm going to do what it is that you've called me to do. I'm going to align my finances. I'm going to align my life. I'm going to get serious about the time that I'm spending. I am going to do whatever it is that God says do. I am not going to sit by the sidelines any longer. It's time to get in position. Just because it is unorthodox doesn't mean that it's unauthorized. Just because the thing that he's called you to do does not look like it's looked for others, it does not mean that he has not said do it. Many of you have been letting the enemy trick you into thinking that what God has said is not the truth, that what you heard was a lie, that you maybe I misthought, maybe I misspoke. You heard God correctly. And it may be unorthodox, but it's not unauthorized. Go with God in this season and do what it is that he is telling you to do. Go with God in this season and do what it is that he is calling you to do. Go with God. Do the thing, that thing that you've been feeling tug at you, do it. The words that you've been feeling trying to come out of your mouth, say it. The places that you feel that you've been ordered to go, you better go. There is a shift happening. And it does not feel good, but it is necessary. We don't get to sit and wait on the wealth transfer. We don't get to just reap the benefits of something that we have not worked for. We talk about faith without work being dead. What work are you doing while you're waiting? Faith is not work. What work are you doing? What are you doing? How are you preparing? Now is the time. So if this episode has been helpful for you, as always, share this message with a friend. Stay strong, stay grounded, and stay rooted.